Hi, this is Biology in a Minute, and I'm Miss Feldbush. Today we're going to be learning about carbohydrates. You've probably heard people talking about carbs. They're talking about things like bread, grains, but also things that are sugars. All of those are examples of carbohydrates. The cell uses them for energy storage, which means we can eat them and get lots of energy as well. Everything you need to know about the elements in carbohydrates you can get from its name. Carbohydrates contain carbon, and they contain water. And hydrate refers to the water, that's hydrogen and oxygen. So the three elements that are found in carbohydrates are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Those carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen molecules are put together into structures that form rings. And the ring-like structure of carbohydrates is one of the things that makes them really easy to recognize. So when I think about carbohydrates, I like to think about donuts, which are also rings and contain carbohydrates like starches and sugars. When those sugar rings are put together, they can be put together into either short or long chains. The shortest chain is one sugar ring, and that's called a monosaccharide. If you look at that word part saccharide, it's the same word that's used in saccharin, and it just means sweet. So one saccharin ring is a monosaccharide, and glucose is the most common monosaccharide. This is one you'll see as a final product in the reactions of photosynthesis that we're going to talk about later. If you take two of those sugar rings and put them together, that makes a disaccharide. And table sugar that you might buy at the store or use in baking is a disaccharide. Those same sugar rings put together into long chains can form complex carbohydrates like starches. If you put the rings together in different ways, you can also form cellulose, which makes up cell walls. Starch, which is a storage molecule, and even glycogen, which is how humans store carbohydrates for the long term. So, some examples of simple carbohydrates to have at hand: sugar, fruit, syrup, anything that tastes sweet is usually a simple carbohydrate. And simple just means it's a very short chain, usually one or two saccharin rings put together. They've got lots of good energy, but it's digested quickly because it's simple. And so these are good sources of quick energy. If you need energy for a longer term, I would recommend complex carbohydrates instead of simple carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates, as the name implies, are made up of longer chains of sugar rings. So it's exactly the same subunit, but when you put them together in longer chains, it takes longer for the body to break them down. And so these are sources of energy that are going to stick with you for a longer term. So anything that's multigrain or whole grain, breads, potatoes, pastas, those are all complex carbohydrates. And even if they're made up of exactly the same rings, the fact that they're put together in longer chains gives them different chemical properties. I hope you've learned a little bit about carbohydrates today, and I'll see you next time on Biology in a Minute.